Chapter 6. James moved fast. He picked up the plastic tumbler on the bedside table and handed it to Poppy. She understood. Feeling giddy and uncoordinated, she took a healthy swig of water and licked her lips to wash any traces of blood away. "What are you doing?" Philip repeated, striding into the room. His eyes were fixed on James, which was good, because Poppy was trying to position herself to hide the side of her neck that James had bitten. "None of your business," she said, and in the same instant she knew it was a mistake. Philip, whose middle name was Stability, was looking distinctly unstable tonight. Mum told him, Poppy thought. "I mean, we weren't doing anything," she amended. It didn't help. Phil was clearly in a mood to see everything in the world as a threat to his sister, and Poppy couldn't really blame him. He'd walked in on the two of them in a strange embrace on a rumpled hospital bed. "James was comforting me because I was scared," she said. She didn't even try to explain why James had been cradling her head to his arm, but she glanced at James's arm surreptitiously and saw that the wound there had already closed, the mark fading. "Everything's all right, you know," James said, standing to fix a mesmerizing silver gaze on Philip. But Phil hardly gave him a glance. He was staring at Poppy. "It's not working," Poppy thought. "Maybe Phil's too mad to be hypnotized, or too stubborn." She looked a question at James, which he answered with a barely discernible shake of his head. He didn't know what the problem was either. But they both knew what it meant. James was going to have to leave. Poppy felt cheated and frustrated. All she wanted was to talk with James, to revel in their new discovery of each other, and she couldn't. Not with Phil here. "How come you're here anyway?" she asked him irritably. "I drove Mum here. You know she doesn't like driving at night. And I bought this." He swung her boombox up onto the bedside table. "And these," he put a black CD case beside it. "All your favourite music." Poppy felt her anger draining away. "That was sweet," she said. She was touched, especially since Phil hadn't said all your favourite weird music, which was usually how he referred to it. "Thank you." Phil shrugged and shrugged, shooting a glare at James. Poor Phil, Poppy thought. Her brother actually looked dishevelled, and his eyes were swollen. "Where's Mum?" she was starting to say when her mother walked in. "I'm back, sweetie," her mother said with a very creditable, cheery smile. Then she looked surprised. "James, it was nice of you to come." "Yeah, but he was just leaving," Phil said significantly. "I'll show him the way out." James didn't waste energy on a fight he couldn't win. He turned to Poppy and said, "I'll see you tomorrow." There was a look in his grey eyes. Grey, not silver now. That was just for her. A look that had never been there in all the years she'd known him. "Goodbye, James," she said softly, "and thank you." She knew he understood what she meant. It wasn't until he was out the door, with Philip on his heels like a bouncer after a rowdy customer, that a thought occurred to her. James said that she would be in danger if she didn't get enough of his blood, but they'd gotten interrupted almost immediately after that. Had Poppy gotten enough? And what would happen if she hadn't? She herself had no idea, and there was no way to ask James. Phil stayed behind James all the way out of the hospital. Not tonight, James thought. He just couldn't deal with Philip North tonight. His patience was gone, and his mind was occupied in calculating whether Poppy had taken enough of his blood to be safe. He thought she had, but the sooner she got more, the better. "You'll see her tomorrow." "Well, you're not going to see her tomorrow," Phil said abruptly as they walked into the garage. "Phil, give me a break." Instead, Philip stepped in front of him and stopped dead, forcing James to stop too. Philip was breathing quickly, his green eyes burning. "Okay, bud," he said. "I don't know what you think you're doing with Poppy, but it's all over now. From now on, you stay away from her. Understand?" Visions of breaking Philip's neck like a new pencil danced in James's head. But Phil was Poppy's brother, and his green eyes were surprisingly like hers. "I would never hurt Poppy," he said wearily. "Give me a break. Are you going to stand there and tell me you don't want to move in on her?" James couldn't come up with an answer immediately. Yesterday he could have truthfully said no. He didn't want to move in on Poppy because it would have meant a death sentence for him and Poppy both. It was only when Poppy had received a death sentence of her own that he'd allowed himself to look at his feelings. And now he'd been close to Poppy. He touched her mind and had found that she was even braver and more gallant than he thought, even more compassionate and more vulnerable. He wanted to be that close to Poppy again. He cared about her in a way that made his throat ache. He belonged with Poppy. He also realized that that might not be enough. Sharing blood forged a powerful bond between two people. It would be wrong of him to take advantage of that bond, or of Poppy's gratitude to him. Until he was sure that Poppy's mind was clear and her decisions were her own, he would keep a little distance. It was the only honourable thing to do. "The last thing I want to do is hurt her," he repeated. "Why can't you believe that?" He made a half-hearted attempt to capture Phil's gaze as he said it. It failed, just as it had in the hospital. Philip seemed to be one of those rare humans who can be influenced by mind control. "Why can't I believe it? Because I know you. You and your girlfriends." Phil managed to make the words sound like a curse. "You go through 6 or 7 a year, and when you're through them, you dump them, like trash." James was distracted briefly by amusement, because Phil was dead on. He needed 6 girlfriends a year. After 2 months, the bond between them became dangerously strong. "Poppy's not my girlfriend, and I'm not going to dump her," he said, pleased at his own cleverness. He'd avoided an outright lie. Poppy wasn't his girlfriend in any normal sense. They'd merged their souls, that was all. They hadn't talked about dating or anything. So you are telling me you're not going to try to put the moves on her? Is that it? Because you better be sure." As he spoke, Phil did what was probably the most dangerous thing he'd ever done in his life. He grabbed James by the front of his shirt. You stupid human," James thought. He briefly considered breaking every bone in Phil's hand, or picking Phil up and throwing him across the garage into somebody's windshield, or "You're Poppy's brother," he said through his teeth, "so I'm going to give you a chance to let go." Phil stared into his face a moment, then let go, looking slightly shaken, but not shaken enough to keep quiet. "You have to leave her alone," he said. "You don't understand. This disease she's got, it's serious. She doesn't need anything messing up her life right now. She just needs..." He stopped and swallowed. Suddenly, James felt very tired. He couldn't blame Phil for being upset. Phil's mind was full of crystal clear pictures of Poppy dying. Usually James got only general images about what humans were thinking, but Philip was broadcasting so loudly it nearly deafened him. Half-truths and evasions hadn't worked. It was time for outright lies. Anything to satisfy Phil and get James away from this.